Hello and welcome to Attacking Third. We are live on YouTube. We are going to chat about some news and notes across global women's soccer, and we are also going to hit you with some World Cup content. We felt like talking about dark horses today, so make sure that you subscribe to us, like this video, and drop us your thoughts on the roster in the chat. Not the roster, the dark horses in the chat. Hey everyone, and welcome into Attacking Third, a CBS Sports soccer podcast. I'm Sandra, and I lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports. Joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host Lisa Carlin. We are going to chat about news and notes across the global women's soccer. We're going to talk about World Cup dark horses because we're just days away from the 2023 World Cup. So, a quick reminder to make sure that you're downloading, following, subscribe to all of Attacking Third channels because you have to get all of our content for all things World Cup, for all things United States Women's National Team analysis, and more. Lisa, we're back at it. I'm so excited. How are you this morning?
I'm good. It's so good to be live on YouTube and chat with you. There's a lot to dive into today. News and notes that we're getting into. Happy 4th of July, everyone. I hope that your dogs are okay and your babies are
Oh
okay
my
from the
God.
fireworks. That was a big thing, of course. I got to take in some fireworks around Philadelphia, which Sandra, I know you tweeted this out. There's a lot of people that set off their own fireworks. So I was not in proximity enough to see the official Philadelphia city fireworks last night. But I saw plenty of fireworks shows. That the rooftop we were on had a 360 view of them, people setting them off, which was pretty good. Pretty fun to watch and see. But good morning. How are you, bud?
I'm with you. I thank you for your note on the babies and the dogs. I had to make sure that my dog was okay,
Mhm.
and eventually, at a certain point in the night, he was. But it's tough because I'm someone that, I don't mind fireworks. I think they look cool. I like taking a look at the fireworks shows and things like that. So, but I feel bad, for my
Yeah.
dog. But I was grateful to have the extra day. I was grateful to have some good food off the grill. That's always fun, and I hope everyone else got to have a good time too if they were, finding themselves celebrating. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I couldn't help but keep thinking about attacking third and hopping on this show and saying we got to talk about it. We got to talk about all of these things that are happening. Shout out to everyone joining us in live. We appreciate you as always. Again, these are one of those things. If you subscribe to us, you get those alerts for whenever we go live, and you get to join us live on YouTube. Get involved in the chat. Let us know your thoughts about everything. And look, there's a lot of different bits of news that we want to talk about. So of course, I'm eager to hear about your reactions, Lisa. I'm eager to hear from everyone else's as well. We should just start with probably some uncomfortable news that we have to talk about. Unfortunately, let's just like kind of rip the band-aid off before we get into some of the other stuff like player signings and things like that. There was some recent reporting out of the Athletic this earlier this week around Vera Pauw, the Ireland national team coach, reporting from Steph Young and Sarah Separate out of the Athletic, referring to allegations essentially of a culture of fear stemming from the 2018 season in NWSL with Vera Pauw as she was head coach of the Houston Dash. And it was another one of those tough reads, Lisa. I'm not
Mhm.
going to lie. When I saw the report drop, I was like, okay, let's take a look at this and see where it is because we're talking about something that happened 5 or so years ago at this point, and you're always curious about what's going to come out of these things. And I think the biggest takeaway for me within this reporting was that so many of the sources within this who found themselves essentially victims of Paw during her time with Houston Dash in 2018, they all felt the importance of being anonymous in this
Yeah.
piece, whether they were a player, a former player, or a former staff member of Pause, just for their overall protection and safety moving forward. So they were referred to as staffer A, B, or C, or player A, B, and C. And that was really the biggest, most glaring thing for me, that here we are years later, and we're coming off of a couple of years here where there has been extensive work in terms of like the other allegations and other reports and other investigations that have taken place, whether it was via U.S. Soccer and the Sally Yates investigation or the NWSL and Players Association joint team investigation, that at this point in year 11 of NWSL, there's all of these protocols and policies in place moving forward. So to have like kind of this flashback into a certain era of NWSL, it kind of takes you into a place where wasn't too long ago. But you're hopeful, and that some of the current culture around clubs in the league kind of maybe pave the way for former players or former staffers to try to share their experiences and stories, even within remaining anonymous for their protection.
Yeah, very interesting kind of all this coming out from The Athletic, as you mentioned, and really the allegations. I mean, in the article written on The Athletic by Steph Yang and Sarah Shepard, they did a great job, but I think it's really important that they included a lot of quotes from their sources. Now, as you mentioned, Sandra, none of the sources are named out of fear, but the quotes are really interesting to me. One former player saying that Paul was, quote, the most terrible coach I've ever had, saying that she would comment on players' weight and appearance. Another player saying we were all afraid of her because we had no idea what she was going to do day to day. Vera was the worst, most terrible coach I've ever had. Mentally, it was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this with her. Another player saying, I hated going to practice. I was miserable. If I had another year like that, I would not be playing professional soccer anymore. Another quote, everybody had their own coaching style. I get it, but it was, in my opinion, abusive and inappropriate, belittling in such a public matter. So those are just some of the examples of what the players were reported for Paul and kind of how she ended up coaching throughout the NWSL. And as you mentioned, this was a couple years ago, 2018, when she was with Houston Dash. It was just 1 year. And otherwise, she had coached nations before that, right? International, Scotland, Netherlands, Russia. She was with South Africa. She spent 1 year in Houston. But now, after being with Houston for 2018, starting in 2019, Vera Pauw went on to coach the Republic of Ireland and ultimately, to be frank, led them to their first World Cup, which is set to kick off in about 2 weeks from today. So now that's where she is. Vera Pauw is the head manager of the Republic of Ireland, headed to the World Cup. And as it's why it's pretty timely that these accusations are coming out about her time in Houston, although several years ago in 2018, why it's relevant now, because she is still coaching at the international level for Ireland.
Yeah, and I thought, look, shout out to Steph Yang. I thought it was important or a good point that she made a note within, her tweeting the story out about it, directly addressing that, saying, if you're wondering why we're investigating this now, that it was Paul who actually approached The Athletic this year in April of 2023 about, quote, protecting coaches from players, given previous complaints in the NWSLPA joint investigation. That's why they felt the need to go back to former Dash players and staff, and that it was 7 of them in total that agreed to talk with The Athletic about Paul and varying allegations. So that also was something that kind of just popped out to me. I was like, wow, like just the gall that someone with so many allegations around them can have to say, you know what, how about you go and protect coaches within this. And so they were like, okay, well, let's open this up then and talk about it and report it and investigate on it and then report it. And that was very hard for me to sort of consume within this story as well, because I just couldn't help but feel like there was a lot of turning of things around on players. There were stretches of the reporting where it felt like victim blaming. So that was a very difficult thing for me to read. So I would, if folks are just hearing about it for the first time with us talking about it on A3, and you subscribe to The Athletic and go and read it, just those are your trigger warnings. So I guess for me, as someone who took a look at the reporting when it dropped. But I think your spot on about it in terms of connecting it to what it means right now in present day, that she's the current head coach of another national team now. She has been for quite some time, and they're, yes, have made some history already together. They're going to be debutantes in this upcoming World Cup. But you have to wonder if this is going to be one of those things where maybe it's an outside factor, and perhaps it's something that Paw, maybe not the players, but is Paw going to be distracted by something like
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard not to be distracted by something like this. Even some of the players that are on her Ireland national team that read this article, whether they have experience with this or they don't, it's just kind of interesting that it comes up right now as these players are preparing for the biggest moment in their lives, right? At this point, going to the World Cup. But yeah, I think in the article, it's definitely a great read. Go check it out. It is interesting how she kind of does turn it back on the players and say that they're the ones that created the hostile environment for her, and that it was an agenda from the players to make her life not great as a coach there. But yeah, I mean, ultimately the allegations and accusations saying that Paul was considered to be abusive, detrimental to their performance, and overall inappropriate as a coach, which is interesting that this comes out of the NWSL after just a year and a half ago, when the Players Association and the players took it in their own hands, Kaya McCullough and Mana Shim and Sinead Farley, to kind of bring light to a lot of the different abusive situations that the players had faced throughout the NWSL. And now that it's kind of coming full circle again, as they circle back on a female coach in the league, right? I think that's also something to kind of point out, and that it is still possible that it doesn't have to be a male coach, and anything can happen.
Which is it's almost a funny point to even bring up as I hear you mention it, because also within the article, this Vera Pauw and her constant referencing of Pep Guardiola, and like talking about like, oh, if I was coaching in this manner as a male coach, like it wouldn't be considered this way, like trying to point out a sexism essentially and a double standard. But again, at the same time, as someone just reading it, I was just kind of like, wow, that again, the goal to just sort of compare yourself to someone like a Guardiola. I was like, okay, this is getting a little too much, and just reading it again, there were parts of it that make you uncomfortable sometimes, which is why I was like, let's make sure that we let the folks know that if they decide to go read it, there might be some stretches of that are uncomfortable. And it's important to sort of bring all those things full circle and kind of connect those dots. I mean, Sinead Farley got named to this Ireland roster, and I think that's the other takeaway that I would come from this, that I would not want to see something like this bombard those players. Sinead Farley has had a remarkable comeback and a remarkable story that's still going on because she's about to go to a World Cup. And you just don't want to see players have to answer for other people's actions or allegations of that sort. So I'm hopeful that the media who continue to cover this in the World Cup can continue to be mindful of that, and allow players to just go and compete in the World Cup.
Yeah, as they have to focus on what's next for them. And like I said, the biggest tournament of their entire lives. Houston Dash and the NWSL did put out a statement apologizing to players past and present who were subject to misconduct by Paul, saying that they apologize for anything that they did. So interesting that kind of came out from them. Nothing from NWSL Players Association on their social media. But I think it's more all eyes are, she's not in the NWSL anymore. That's like a matter of fact. So there's not much that like the league can do at this point in terms of actually punishing Paul. But now the fact that she goes forth, she starts on July 20th with Ireland against hosts Australia in the World Cup. Playing away, playing against the host nation. It's going to be an uphill battle for Vera Pauw, for the Irish side, going into this World Cup, and that's really the next page that these players have to turn to and focus on moving forward.
We'll definitely keep an eye on it as things progress, but we are going to take a quick break, so stick with us. Said I'm fired up. I'm sorry your time's up. I see the came from the ashes, I rise up. All right, we're going to talk about some more news across the global women's soccer, but we're going to start overseas in England before we head on back to NWSL because we want to talk about some player signing news. And of course, we have to speak about Alessia Russo to Arsenal. Big signing. It's maybe one of those worst kept secret type of signings. Look, this is a very exciting player that I know folks are eager to watch perform with England in the World Cup, but has been a massive player in Women's Super League. Was initially with Manchester United. And there was already some chatter mid-season there, like would they transfer Russo to Arsenal? Would there be a record transfer fee figure involved? Lots of back and forth, but Man United in the middle of a title race in the league that ended up not making the move, but that is done and dusted. League is over, calendar year's done, the World Cup's on the horizon, and that means Russo is free to negotiate, and she will now be a gunner.
Yeah, this is massive. I mean, despite all the rumors and the fact that a lot of people knew she was going to go a lot of different places, right? There was rumors of Washington Spirit in the NWSL. There was rumors that Alessia Russo was going to go anywhere, but they knew she was leaving. And I think that's like kind of interesting to look back on because I believe it was January of this year is when Arsenal initially put in bids for Russo saying, hey, we want her. We want this player. And Man United denying that, turning both of those claims down, saying that no, we're still renegotiating her contract. She's going to stay here at this point. But ultimately, the contract negotiations between Russo and Manchester United did fizzle out. She did become a free agent, and now she's going to be joining for Arsenal with a massive front line that's already there between Vivian Miedema, Beth Mead, Katie McCabe, Lena Huerta, Caitlin Ford. Like the number of players at Arsenal is massive. And I think there's also a bit of a conversation between Arsenal in the Women's Super League and Manchester United and why would she be taking a quote step down to go to Arsenal, but that's not the truth at all. I think that we've talked about the Super League a million times here on this podcast, that the top 4 teams in the league are just always competing. Chelsea, Arsenal, Man United, Man City, they're at the top of the table. They're ready to compete. Any one of them on any given Sunday can be in that number 1 place, lifting the trophy at the end. But I think it's more just monumental for Russo at this point to be going to Arsenal and leaving Manchester United really at this point because as she said, Manchester United was her childhood club. She's a United fan, but that's football things and things change and things move on. And she stated that she's at this point in the journey in her career that she wants a new challenge, and that's what she's searching for. And she's going to get settled with Arsenal and get going before she hits the pitch again. But she's had a very interesting career, and now as she heads to the World Cup, I love watching this player and watching her path from playing collegiately. Yep. Right in the States, she went to UNC. She was a Tar Heel, and she played for Chelsea's academy team growing up, and she's just had a very storied career. And believe me, her story is not done yet.
I love this signing. Look, I know there's lots of the discourse is really around the way in which it happened. There's why would you allow a player to play through and then essentially not be able to sign her back and let her go for free? Like all of the discourses around the dollars around it in terms of the timing. But look, Manchester United was right there the entire time this season, right? Like chasing that number 1 spot. They wanted to get that title. Yeah, so why would you move one of your best players in the middle of a title chase? That's kind of the angle I'm taking it from. So yeah, you bid farewell and you sort of see okay, we're not seeing any return on that, but you kind of roll the dice. You gamble and you say, hey, we're going to try to run and gun for this title, and it doesn't happen. It doesn't work out. But that doesn't make me like the signing any less. I love Russo to Arsenal. I think it's smart. Look, timetables are always going to vary when it comes to ACLs, right? And we saw this Arsenal side struggle with injury over the course of the last year. Multiple players out, and not just any players. We're talking key players for this Arsenal squad and England's national team as well. So again, the timelines vary. How those players are going to look when they return from those type of major injuries
Mhm.
is a factor as well. We don't know what Midama is going to look like, post ACL, or Beth Mead. So having Russo and hopeful that she probably has a successful World Cup and can roll that into a new season with Arsenal, I'm sure has fans very, very excited,
Yeah.
myself included. So I can't wait to see her in action in Women's Super League. But I liked it. Probably the biggest signing I think that we've seen so far. But
I mean, still the biggest signing, but there's so many rumors
there's
around
so
it.
many rumors around others. But Women's Super Chelsea is still
Yeah.
getting their signings in. They finally, again, the secrets are out now, kind of thing. They had Ashley Lawrence, and announced her as well to the squad, and this is already after they announced Katerina Macario. So now they've got Ashley Lawrence involved in the mix, joining up with her Canadian teammate Khadijah Buchanan. So it's just they're making moves. Women's Super League teams are making moves. It's an exciting time for sure. Transfer window is open in NWSL as well, though. So let's bring it on home and talk about some signings that have occurred over the last week or so. We absolutely want to start off with Orlando Pride because they recently announced the signing of Rafael Sosa to the team. It is becoming a home away from home, I think, for Brazilian international players. This was a big one. That also got sort of, around the world of women's soccer before it was actually made official. You kind of thought about this signing in particular and wondered, hey, when is it going to get announced? Now it's finally here. I loved the video. It has the, three Brazilian players going to a Brazilian steakhouse
Oh, it's
and
awesome.
asking for a table, and the host says, hey, Meisha Patres, and no, Marta says, I actually want it for four. It's fantastic. I love it. And then you have Rafael calling in and saying, hey, we got work to do in the World Cup, but I'll be there soon. So I loved it. And I thought it was clever, witty, smart. And in terms of the actual signing, it's going to boost up the back line for sure.
Yeah, she comes over from Arsenal, 3-year deal in the NWSL with Orlando Pride. Fantastic to see. She's actually been in the NWSL before, so not an NWSL rookie. She is back. She spent time with the Houston Dash in 2014 as part of that team. She's a namestay. Yeah, I agree, Sandra. The video for announcing this is just so well done. The creativity and the PR teams for the NWSL teams and across the world is tremendous. They do such a good job playing on the players' personalities and bringing them in, and yeah, I think it's a bit of a haven here for Brazilian players. I think whatever they talk about, they say, hey, get on over here. We can make some magic in the NWSL. Come on over, Brazilians, because we're continuing to see an influx of players, which is, I mean, there's so many positives for it, but now, like, as we go into the World Cup, I think that's a moment where a lot of fans of the sport that really just focus on the United States women's national team and maybe just the NWSL, and they don't really expand to other nations or other countries because they're so focused on the American side of things. They know these players from playing in the NWSL, especially the Brazilians when you look across the board. And now, as we turn the page to the World Cup and we'll start to see them wearing their nation's colors and jerseys, now these NWSL fans have a little bit more in it, a little more skin in the game to maybe cheer or watch these other teams. And man, this is how we grow the sport. But this is massive for Orlando to add this type of player in the midfield for them. They need this. They're going to need this coming back from the World Cup, pick up points, get on a run towards the end of the season.
Yeah, they're kind of sitting right in that kind of gray area of the table right now. Like, will they or won't they make a run and try to battle for maybe one of those lower kind of playoff seeds? But I think it's smart, honestly, and I love that they lean into it. We have to be frank about the offseason that occurred for Orlando Pride. I mean, this was the first ever period of a free agent market for the league. They were contenders in
Yep.
that. We had talked about it, we had covered it. They swung and they missed. They were able to re-sign Marta, who was listed on that free agency player list, and that's a huge target, an icon of the game, but probably a player that wanted to remain in Orlando because of all of the work and foundation that she has sort of laid there within that club. So they re-signed the icon and fan favorite back in Marta. But in terms of other players that were available, they were not able to go out there and land some of those other marquee type of players on the free agency
Yeah.
list. So I like the energy to kind of turn that around a little bit and say what works for
Yep.
us
Put
as
the
a
ball
club.
back in their court and say, hey, how can we capitalize on allocation money and international roster slots and really pick up points and momentum after the World Cup? Because even during the World Cup right now, they're only missing 2 players in Adriana and Marta. Now, of course, they are missing this player as well, but she has yet to join and yet to come over to Orlando. So that gives them an advantage heading into this stretch of World Cup play because they're only without 2 of their players. And then they get the power of 3 back after the World Cup. I think good moves for the team in purple for the Pride.
I think with we see this influx of Brazilian players coming into the league as well, and you could look at Orlando Pride as a club to where if you're a Brazilian player and you are breaking through to the NWSL, maybe you want to have negotiations and talks with this club specifically. They're no strangers to that either. You know, we've seen Camila on this team before in the past. We've seen Monica on this team before in the past, alongside Marta, and now with Adriana, you know, in this season, and now they're going to have Rafael as well. So I like it. I think it's smart. I think it leans in. Orlando's leaning into their strengths actually, and saying that look, we can be a destination for, a certain type of player, and let's try to create something fun, competitive, and moving forward maybe we'll continue to be this type of destination for these players. So I like this signing a lot. I'm eager to see what it looks like under Seb Hines moving forward, but we'll have to wait, like you said, Lisa, because there's a World Cup happening pretty quickly. But Kansas City Current also getting in on the fun with international players as well. They announced that they have signed defender Stina Balint-Sager to the roster. How do you feel about this signing, Lisa? Because I was like, a defender. That's interesting.
Yeah, Balance-Sager is interesting. I agree for Casey. I'm a little surprised at this, but they're also still dealing with a number of injuries and players getting back. They were supposed to have Hannah Gloss. Remember, they did sign the international, and she ultimately got hurt, injured, and went on SEI list. So perhaps that's the role really they're looking to fill, to have just a bit more depth in the back line. But yeah, it's through the 2024 season. She's Danish international, so she's not going to be joining the Current until after the World Cup. But she's a prolific Danish player with 43 caps for Denmark, led them to the 2017 Euros final. She's been captain of her club teams previously. I think it's a big signing for them. Interesting to see how ultimately she will fit into what Kansas City Current is looking to build there. I think they still have a lot of question marks, right? With Stina coming in, how does that fit into the back line? They're still trying to figure things out. This is another team in the NWSL that needs to kind of pick up speed and pick up points as they go along. And sometimes I think I look at some teams and it's like, all right, they're just throwing anything at the wall. They're going to see what sticks and what happens. I don't necessarily think that's the case with Stina. I frankly, I think that this is such a prolific player that they know that she can make an impact and help lead this team. But coming into the NWSL, of course, there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment period, but I'm interested to see kind of where along the back line this player plays. Who knows, maybe a bit more in the midfield, but they're already stacked in the midfield. So I think it'll be a back line slot in for sure.
All right, well, we'll see what it looks like and what interim head coach Carlin has up her sleeve with this player moving forward. They gotta take care of some business in the regular season, because you gotta pretty much win a lot of games from here on out if you want to make a run up that table. So we'll see how it looks for the Current when she returns from the World Cup. There was also some general NWSL news around the expansion draft that dropped earlier this week. Let's talk about Utah Royals FC and Bay FC, because they will begin play in 2024. They participated in what was essentially referred to as asset selection order. Don't know how I feel about that title, but there was a number of things that they needed to figure out, because with 2 teams coming into the league in 2024, there's going to be the NWSL draft that they have to prepare for. That's going to be the NWSL expansion draft that they have to prepare for. Those are two big ones, right? But there are other things like discovery order, waiver wire order, etc., etc. So that's essentially what these two teams and the league and its governing body went through over the course of a meeting. And it turns out the way things happened, it was alternating. So I believe Utah was able to pick first in asset selection order, and then Bay FC got to pick as well. So they alternated until everything was worked out. But now it's official. Utah Royals will have the number 1 overall pick in the NWSL draft in the first and third rounds of the draft. Bay FC will have those same picks, but in the second and fourth rounds. And we've got Bay FC with the number 1 pick in the expansion draft.
Yeah, massive. I think that for A-Rod, Amy Rodriguez, who is the head coach at Utah Royals, really saying that she wanted the first pick in the NWSL draft. That's how they're going to look to build their roster for 2024, that they're ready to get going. Now that the list of names hasn't been opened yet, the deadline hasn't been opened yet, we're a little too far out for us to kind of speculate on that and start looking at some of the players who might be named, who might be in that draft class that Utah could pick from first. But I think it's interesting that Bay FC is going to pick first for the expansion draft. And frankly, if that stays, because as we saw in the expansion draft last year with Angel City coming in and San Diego Wave, there's a lot of trades that happen, a lot of protection trades that happen heading into it, because as one of the other 12 clubs in the NWSL, you want to protect your players, or at least have the least amount of surprises heading into the expansion draft. So you make trades and negotiations with the expansion team saying, hey, we'll give you this player for protection of expansion draft protection. So will they actually pick first, or will they get a little bit of closure? There's so much more to come. I'm like flabbergasted that I've like honestly forgot. I'm going to be really frank right now. I've almost forgotten that we're adding 2 teams in the NWSL come 2024, because the World Cup is 14 days away from right now, that I'm just like so focused on international football and this NWSL season. But not only is there going to be a college draft, but an expansion draft. There's so much to come in the next year for the NWSL. It's amazing.
No, we're gonna have a busy off season for sure. I'm very curious to see how things are gonna shake out. I think it's gonna be a little different than what we saw in this previous off season, with 2 California teams coming into the fold, SoCal and area teams in LA and San Diego, and there's a third California team for Bay FC. And I would imagine that maybe there's more chatter amongst players around the possibility of going to a team like that. I don't know if there's the same chatter for players around Utah. I'll just be frank. It's unfortunate, but in the past, there have been not good experiences that Black players in this league have had when they played in games in Utah before in the past. So there's some things there that franchise has to work with, a past that maybe they need to try to make sure that when they're trying to court players or persuade players or pitch players, like, hey, come and play for us, that might be concerns for them. So I'm eager to see how it shakes out and what it looks like, because it sort of felt like in this last offseason, all previous 10 clubs were very open to wheeling and dealing, because they knew they were going to have players that wanted to request trades or, look and explore some options. But I don't know if that's going to be the case this year.
We also have the element of free agents, right? There's another wave of free agents that become available at the end of this year, and kind of where they go. And that's really been the talk in the league over the last year, saying that coaches want to try to respect players' wishes of where they want to be and what's going to happen. That's a really good point you make about that, about how, if players are going to want to go to Utah. Frankly, I think they'll want to go to Bay FC. I think there's a lot of sell there for players, but interesting who's going to go to Utah. But it'll be similar rules that we saw last year for the expansion draft. So Utah will pick first in the college draft. So They will then pick second in the expansion draft, with Bay FC picking first, and then Royals and Bay FC will alternate. They'll each be able to pick to pick a player from each of the league's 12 teams, but they're only allowed to pick one U.S. national team allocated player. That's kind of how we saw it last year unfold, but much more to come in the offseason in terms of trades and wheeling and dealing and protection that'll come from this.
That's a good point that you make too, as well, because it's like how are clubs going to get to negotiate any potential trades moving forward, because so many of those former allocated players have signed direct contracts with their clubs. So it's like, how does that work, with those things as well? So I'm eager to see how the two expansion sides kind of navigate those waters moving forward in the offseason.
It should be a good one. It will be a very good one.
Things like this give us a little bit of order to take a look at and see how they might try to target some things. So we definitely wanted to touch on that to close out the news portion of the episode. But stick with us, because we want to talk about some World Cup dark horses after a quick break.
And how about this?
Get ready for non-stop action that will have you saying,
You gotta be kidding!
"Oh my, Canada."
Mr. Chase thinks, what a play and what a finish!
That's some pretty good football, eh?
He's gone all the way to the house!
It's the Canadian Football League, Thursday on CBS Sports Network.
All right, let's talk about the World Cup, because it is just literal days away. We're about 2 weeks out from the start of the 2023 World Cup. It will kick off on July 20th in Australia and New Zealand. The co-hosts will face off on that day. We've got New Zealand going up against Norway. We've got Australia going up against Ireland. What a time, and it's almost here. So we thought, you know what, let's have some fun. Let's maybe chat about some dark horses. Who are some teams that we think are going to shake things up in this 2023 World Cup? I think folks can maybe take a look and say, hey, this team, that team, those are going to be the contenders. And you know what? I would argue that any of the top 10 FIFA ranked teams are a contender for this World Cup. Yes, the United States women's national team are reigning World Cup champions. Yes, England are the reigning Euro champions. All of those things are true. But another thing that's true is that any of these top 10 FIFA ranked teams, when they go up against each other, they can get the better of the other on any given day. So that is why I think any of them can really be considered a contender in this World Cup buildup. If you're interested in the official rankings, I got you covered. You can go to cbssports.com. Not only do I have the FIFA rankings for you, but I did a remix, and I actually did a power ranking of the top 10. So I bumped some teams a little higher, and I bumped some teams a little lower as well, in my opinion. So go check that out if you've got the time. But for the dark horses, the teams that we think that maybe might be a little underrated or might surprise some folks along the way, who are you looking at and why, Lisa?
Yeah, one of my biggest dark horses is the Republic of Ireland. And they're a dark horse because they're debutantes. They've never been to a World Cup, but they're pretty good, right? They're 22 in the FIFA ranking, so definitely not top 10, definitely a nation that maybe some other nations are sleeping on. They're in the group of death, and that's probably going to be the hardest thing for the Republic of Ireland. They got dealt a pretty crappy hand heading into this World Cup. When you look at their Group B that they're in, it is the Republic of Ireland against Canada, Olympic gold medalist, Nigeria, and then Australia, the host nation for this World Cup. For sure, my group of death when I look at the groups across the stage here. But when you really dive into Ireland and what they have and the players they have going for them, you can't help but reflect, especially here at Attacking Third, on the two matches that Ireland played against the United States in April. And those were really narrow scorelines. It was a 1-0 scoreline and a 2-0 scoreline. And what the United States saw from Ireland was a team that was ready to play, also a team that hadn't had a lot of time together. And the fact that an Irish side could come in not having played a lot of matches together as a group and as that core that they were, not a lot of trainings together, and hold the U.S. to under 3 goals in 2 games is pretty impressive. They're a gritty team. They're very physical. They're really aggressive in what they're able to do. They're going to need that for their group stage completely, especially because they open up group play against Australia on the opening day ceremonies. Like, that is so tough, but I'm trying to balance in my mind, like, Ireland being debutantes of this World Cup and all the firepower that they have coming into this, with Australia being the host nation and opening it. Like, this is my number one game to watch on opening day. And I think that Ireland could shock the world and come out with some really good play. They've also played a lot of good nations in international competition: Scotland, Finland, China, Philippines, Zambia. They went on an incredible run in 2022, going unbeaten for most of those games. And they've got Katie McCabe from Arsenal in the front line. She led Arsenal to the Champions League semis. She's a massive player for this team, and I think that she can put a lot of the pressure on her shoulders and run with Ireland for this World Cup. I'm excited about the Irish. I am.
I'm getting chills listening to your case for the girls in green in this World Cup. And listen, I'm buying into it as well. Like, this is the fun part about the dark horse.
I love this.
I think anyone can make a case for their dark horse team or their underdog team,
For sure.
and you can like get excited about it. And I like that you're going with Ireland, because look, it's also I think it's also just such an unpredictable group as well. That they're,
Right.
you know, it's like they're going up against the co-host in Australia for that first game, and that in itself is going to be a huge test, right? Because just the weight that Australia is going to have on their shoulders going into this World Cup as a co-host, as a team that has several players on the roster who have been playing together for years, and they really feel that this is their moment, that they can try to capitalize on that. But it's not just Australia that they have to, try to take a look at. They've got Canada waiting for them in this group. They've got Nigeria waiting for them in this group. And that's why I feel it's like this is really could be an unpredictable type of group, just because of some of the different factors that go in it as well. We talk about the different pressures of things within this group. Ireland as a debutante, if you mentioned, Australia as the host. We have Nigeria and Canada, unfortunately.
It's the group of chaos.
It is. I mean, I don't know if it's a group of chaos, but I think there's a lot of unknowns. Those two teams, Canada and Nigeria, they're unfortunately still dealing with issues with their federation. And we're talking about into the buildup for this World Cup. So how are they going to look? How prepared are they going to be for this World Cup, as it's just weeks away? So I feel you 100% on Ireland. I think that's a fun team to kind of rally around, but as well as being debutantes, I've got a debutante in my radar as well. I'm actually looking in Group E. I'm looking at Portugal as a dark horse in this World Cup. I'm very excited about this team. I think they had some thrillers in qualification and the build up to this moment. And they had to take a longer road and a longer journey to get here. They had to play in that Interconfederation playoff to finally determine a place in this World Cup. And then they got drawn into Group E alongside the World Cup champions in the United States. But they're also going to go up against fellow debutantes in Vietnam. And they're also going to go up against the Netherlands, a team that I think they might surprise along the way. And I'm looking at this team because their very last game in the group will be against the United States. So they will have already had games against Vietnam and the Netherlands. So I think if they can get results out of those two games, that final game against the United States could be a little bit tense. But I'm very eager and excited to see it, especially considering the opposition that they have also just faced. You mentioned Ireland going up against some steep competition. They just held the Lionesses to a 0-0 draw.
Massive. That was just a couple of days ago, right? Early first day of July 1st, and massive 0-0 draw for Portugal. To come out and pick up those points. I love this shout for Portugal. It's something about the debutantes this year. With 32 teams in the World Cup, there's a lot of debutantes coming in. There's a lot of upsets that can happen. I like this. I like that you're giving a shout to Portugal. Yeah, they're in pretty good form right now heading into this World Cup. They've got their blinders on and they're ready to grind through Group B.
I think it's going to benefit them that they have to not worry about the United States until the final part of the group stage, because maybe you muster up and have all of your energy for those first two group stages, and maybe you just try to play a good, strong, competitive match against the reigning champion. So they have a number of ways I think that they can navigate this group. I'm very excited to see it.
And speaking of Group E with the United States, the Netherlands, Portugal, as you just talked about as being your dark horse, Vietnam, they just played in a friendly at the end of June, and they got a goal in on Germany. It's pretty impressive to see from another debutante in the World Cup. It was a 2-1 final in favor of Germany against Vietnam. They'll also play against New Zealand coming up next week, which is interesting. Now is like the time, everyone. If you haven't been tuning in to the international friendlies and the schedule across the world game right now, start watching the games. Of course, the United States plays in their send-off series against Wales. That's happening on Sunday. We'll have it all covered here for you on Attacking Third. But any other nation that you're interested in, I mean, go check it out. I would rewatch that Portugal-English game. That was a really good match. Vietnam, New Zealand, I'm excited for that one coming up on July 10th. I think there's just a lot of good matches out there happening right now, and you can get a glimpse, a little firsthand look at some of these nations with their World Cup squad as they prepare to head over to Australia.
The send-off games, I think, are just like a lot of fun. Like they're their final glimpse, right, at teams before they head off. I know we're going to be covering United States against Wales, but just these ones that you just mentioned, the ones that have already taken place, and then on top of that, the ones that are still going to come up, it's going to be that final look, that final glimpse, those games that you kind of tighten up things on the pitch, and we'll see. Maybe you want to tighten things up, but you also don't want to show too much, right?
I know.
Moving these games, so we're excited to take a look at them and cover them.
I mean, we'll dive into that for the United States because they play on Sunday, so we'll preview that match for everyone. But I've already been thinking about my projected lineup for the United States. Are they going to go out with their A team? Are they not? What's going to happen? You don't show all your cards. You can't show all your cards because every single nation in the World Cup is going to be watching your final match before you went to the World Cup as preparation, right? That's where they're going to start because at least that's the squad and those are the players you're going forward with throughout the rounds and all the different matches throughout the World Cup. So that's what nations are going to key in on. So you can't show all your cards at that point. You have to keep some secrets a little bit hidden, at least some of your trick plays, your set pieces, those types of things. You hope for no penalty kicks, right? You don't want to be giving away anything. It is the most wonderful time of the year right now. Welcome
to be here with you through it all, Lisa. It's just getting started. Let's just be real. It's just getting started because it's just days away. Got a couple weeks till the 2023 World Cup. And of course, we'll have lots more content for you all along the way. But that's a wrap for today. So thank you all for listening to Attacking Third. Download, follow, and listen to us anywhere you get your podcast. You can watch us too. So subscribe to us on YouTube to get alerts for whenever we go live at youtube.com/Attacking Third. And we'll be back with more content for you this week. So stay tuned. For Sandra, Herrera, and Lisa Carlin, this was Attacking Third.